All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is group number 1 with Amanda Aldridge, Tim Wynn, Kimberly Smith, which is myself as the group leader, over the discussion post 9, Internal Struggles Between Good and Evil. We are interpreting and analyzing the 3 poems, one, The Caller by George Herbert, Kalika by Fulk Greville, not sure if I'm saying that right, and then Batter My Heart by John Donne. So the ideas and interpretations of our group were pretty different and similar among the participating members. Each member quoted various lines within the poem that ultimately led to all of our understandings and interpretations of these poems. So to start with The Caller by George Herbert, each student picked up and interpreted the narrated speaker of the poem as a priest who is trapped by Tim Wynn, mad at by Smith, and dissatisfied by Aldridge with God. So those were the 3 students. We all found out, or we all interpreted him as a priest who was either trapped, mad at, or dissatisfied with God. The internal struggle was identified clearly by each student's understanding of the poem. Aldridge quoted that the speaker seems to be a priest because it refers to the white collar around their neck, and Wynn expressed his struggles of being in the priesthood. The themes presented by each student, the theme of the internal struggle presented by each student of the poem as being what was one's purpose in the life chosen by the priest. Smith found the struggle in lines 1 and 2 of the poem that read, "No more I will abroad," and interpreted as crying out, saying he's done, and moving forward with a different way of life, whereas Aldridge also quoted lines 1 and 2 and took it as the speaker was tired of serving God and is done following. Aldridge also states that the theme was as being self-doubt. Wynn has the same interpretation in the theme as to being faith versus doubt. Each student interpret how the narrator / speaker either questions or argues whether priesthood was the right decision in their lives. Wynn quoted line 6, "Shall I be still in suit?" Smith quoted, "I have no harvest but a thorn," which was interpreted of the speaker questioning what the purpose of his sacrifice and servitude has or was. Apologize. The resolution of the poem was easily deciphered and interpreted by each student. Lines 35 through 36 was quoted by all 3 of the participating members, reading, "Methought I heard one calling, 'Child,' and I replied, 'My Lord.'" Smith states just as the speaker was getting angrier, the voice of or calling he heard made the problem of trusting his life's work go away. Wynn exclaims that the priest realizes that God is calling him and restores his faith. And so that was our interpretation of The Caller by George Herbert. Group 1's analysis and interpretation by Kalika by Fulk Greville. Each student interpreted this poem the same, but with different adjectives for the poem. Isolated and emotionless came from Aldridge. Loneliness and in the dark was from Smith. Darkness was described by Wynn. The overall theme of the poem was expressed by facing and standing up to evil. Smith interprets that the poet is struggling with the ability to understand his feelings and sense of worth and the evils within him. Wynn said, "When there is no light and nothing to see, a person can only see what is inside themselves." And he quotes lines 9 through 10 to validate his idea. Again, this is in Kalika by Fulk Greville. Wynn said, "When there is no light and nothing to see, a person can only see what is inside themselves," and quotes lines 9 to 10 again to validate his idea, such as in thick depriving darkness and proper reflections of the air to be. Aldridge too touches on the darkness and evils within by stating that the speaker seems to have many demons within, And although it does not mention God specifically, he does mention the devil. Lines 13 and 14 were quoted to validate this interpretation. The argument expressed by each student was the internal struggle of only being able to see our demons, evils, and negatives, and unable to shed light on the positives. Wynne quotes lines 5 of the reading, which states, "Gives vain alarms to the inward sense." The resolution was unclear to some of the participating students, but also identified by others. Line 10 was quoted as a resolution by Wynne, which reads, "Proper reflections of error to be." Aldridge interprets a possible resolution as being, "The coming of daylight would probably be the only peace that the speaker is given at any time." All students agreed that this poem was harder to interpret and understand, and the poet himself was harder to read. Okay, moving on to the Holy Sonnet, "Batter My Heart" by John Donne. The interpretation of this poem was agreed upon in all students' responses that the poet was a religious person who wants a stronger relationship with God, guidance from God, and asking for his mercy. That was, again, Aldridge, Wynne, and Smith. Smith states in line 1 that the speaker is stating the presence of the poem, "Batter my heart, three-personed God." Wynne states that he is begging for God's mercy and grace by untying him from his enemy or from Satan. And Aldridge states that he does not want to fall into sin. All three pretty much the same resolution or interpretations of this poem. The responses all point to the internal struggle that the poet has with himself, his sins, and his religious beliefs. The poet wants God to forgive him at all cost, regardless if painful. And a quote that Aldridge took was, "Take me to you, imprison me." And then, "Bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make new." Smith and Wynne quoted those lines. Lines 9 and 10 were quoted by Wynne to validate his statement that the speaker wishes to be free from God's enemy. And Smith also states this is the beginning presence of the internal struggle showing in the readings. And the resolution of this poem was unclear by all the students, as they stated that it wasn't fully identified in the readings. Smith and Wynne believe the resolution lie in the start of line 11, where it reads, "Divorce me, untie, or break that knot again." They believe this is the only way to escape the pain and to serve God freely. So overall, the interpretations and analysis of the three poems by our groups were pretty in line with each other, just kind of described in a little bit different wording, but the overall impressions and interpretations were the same with group number 1. And again, group number 1 was Amanda Aldridge, Tim Wynne, and Kimberly Smith, group leader. Thank you.